With the release of their fourth studio album, 1994's Superunknown, Soundgarden were on top of the world. I mean, in 1994 alone, Alice in Chains, Pearl Jam, and Soundgarden all had #1 studio albums, and then Nirvana had a #1 record in the later part of the year with their MTV Unplugged album. One of the songs found on Superunknown was the track Spoonman. In today's video, let's talk about the history of the song and the man who inspired it. Formed in Seattle in 1984, Soundgarden blended metal and punk rock, resulting in a sludgy sound. In 1987, they released the Screaming Life EP through fledgling Seattle label Sub Pop. They followed it up, releasing 1988's Ultra Mega OK on SST Records. And then Soundgarden became the first of the 4 major Seattle bands from that era to ink a deal with a major label, signing with A&M Records. They released their major label debut in 1989 with Louder Than Love, and then they returned 2 years later with Bad Motor Finger, a record that still held up as some of their best work by their longtime fans. It was also by the early 90s the band cemented their classic lineup with frontman Chris Cornell, guitarist Kim Thayil, bassist Ben Shepherd, and drummer Matt Cameron. Bad Motor Finger was issued in October of 91, 2 weeks after Nirvana's Nevermind came out. Though they were hailed as one of the big 4 bands from Seattle and more experienced than their peers, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, and Alice in Chains enjoyed success much earlier than Soundgarden did. Guitarist Kim Thayil told Revolver, "I remember the Nirvana guys wanting to be on Sub Pop, saying we were their favorite band. The first time I met Kurt Cobain, I told him how much I loved their Love Buzz single, and he said, well, consider yourself our biggest influence." Nevermind set the charts ablaze in January of 92 when it hit #1, displacing Michael Jackson. Smells Like Teen Spirit peaked at #6 on the Hot 100 chart, and also topped the alternative airplay chart. Couple this with several other huge singles for Nirvana that year, including Come As You Are, Lithium, and In Bloom. Then add Pearl Jam's record 10, which produced hits like Jeremy and Even Flow. Then Alice in Chains released their dark masterpiece Dirt, and all 3 of these records outsold Bad Motor Finger. In fact, Alice in Chains' Dirt went platinum in just 3 months, while Bad Motor Finger took 2 years to achieve the same feat. Soundgarden's third album peaked at number 39 on the charts and only produced 1 charting single in the States and outshined. Following the release of their third record, Thayil recalled hearing several songs that Chris Cornell had demoed for what would be their follow-up, Superunknown. These songs included Spoonman, Let Me Drown, and Black Hole Sun. He recalled thinking that there's probably a few singles amongst those songs. It was at a Metallica gig before Superunknown came out that the guitarist spoke to Metallica's manager, Cliff Bernstein, who told him that Soundgarden was following the same career path as Metallica, telling him that their next album was going to be their breakout hit, and he was right. Superunknown was massive, selling an impressive 6 million copies stateside and giving the band some of their most popular songs: Black Hole Sun, Spoonman, Fell on Black Days, and The Day I Tried to Live. By the summer of 93, there was a lot of expectations from the group's record label A&M that Soundgarden's forthcoming record was going to be a massive hit. At the insistence of their label, they teamed up with producer Michael Beinhorn, who had previously worked with Red Hot Chili Peppers and Soul Asylum. Soundgarden, up until this point, had mostly self-produced their own records and had also done some co-production with Pantera producer Terry Date. The band, of course, were a little apprehensive about working with Beinhorn since they were very protective of their creative process and didn't like producers making too many comments or notes. As part of the tryout they did with Beinhorn, they recorded 2 songs. Beinhorn told The Ringer, "I wasn't sure we clicked, but somehow I guess we did." Beinhorn was the type of producer that managers love to work with. He was very good at communicating and keeping things on track and on budget. But the musicians who worked with them usually hated the process. By the time Beinhorn came on board, Soundgarden had about a third of the songs written for their upcoming record. One of the first tapes Beinhorn got from Cornell had about a dozen or so songs on it, but he wasn't impressed. He later admitted that he thought they sounded like second-rate Soundgarden songs. Beinhorn knew he had to talk to Cornell, who felt an immense amount of pressure to stick close to the band's past sound. It wasn't until the producer asked Cornell what bands he liked that the frontman responded the Beatles and Cream, that Beinhorn told him, "Okay, go write songs like the Beatles and Cream." It was at that moment he knew that things started changing for the better. Superunknown saw a March of 94 release date, a month before Nirvana's Kurt Cobain died. Even though Superunknown was released a month before Cobain's death, the members of Soundgarden admitted that it was a slow burn before they started selling a lot of copies. The first single issued was the song Spoonman, which dated back to 1992 and even made a brief cameo in the Cameron Crowe film Singles. Pearl Jam bassist Jeff Ament is credited with coming up with the song title, as it was his responsibility to come up with the fictional song names in the film for the band portrayed in the movie. Chris Cornell even made a cameo in the film and challenged himself to write songs based on the titles that Ament had come up with, hence the writing of Spoonman. Given the popularity of so-called grunge music and the insane amounts of press coverage focused on Seattle's heroin problem, some thought the song was a reference to the drug, but it's not. Instead, the title refers to a local Seattle artist named Artis, who appeared on the track playing the spoons, as well as the music video. Cornell told an interviewer, "It's more about the paradox of who Artis is and what people perceive him as. He's a street musician, but when he's playing on the street, he's given a value and judged completely wrong by someone else. They think he's a street person or he's doing this because he can't hold down a regular job. They put him a few pegs down on the social ladder because of how they perceive someone who dresses differently. The lyrics express the sentiment that I much more easily identify with someone like Artis than I would watch him play." Artis told an interviewer that he was 10 years old when his mother bought him a pair of musical spoons, and she also bought his sister a pair as well. He ended up breaking his spoons, so he took his sister's and never gave them back. He admitted, though, that he wasn't really into spoons at the time, but he went on to add that he listened to a lot of Latin, swing, and Elvis growing up, and whenever he heard a part where a spoon could fit in, he played along to it. Artis ended up dropping out of high school in the 10th grade and enlisted in the Navy by the 60s, but he admitted that he wasn't well liked by his fellow sailors. It wasn't until he showed off his talents with his spoons that he started winning over some friends in the service. Following his time in the Navy, he joined the U.S. Postal Service, got married, had a daughter, and later got divorced. By 1972, he was now living in a historic building in Seattle that had several bars attached. He worked at one of these places and entertained patrons playing spoons along to the music on the jukebox. From that point on, he became a mainstay in Seattle's busking scene, and he even went on to perform with the likes of Aerosmith and Frank Zappa. Zappa even told Art that he didn't have a commercial bone in his body. But sadly, in more recent years, he's suffered from health issues due to excessive drinking and has been on government assistance. As for Spoonman, the song was a big hit, peaking at number 3 on the mainstream rock tracks chart and number 9 on the modern rock tracks chart, getting the album off to a good start. Artis appears on the song, but he didn't get any royalties. Instead, he got a flat fee and is prominently featured in the music video as well. One thing that's important to note about the music video is that while Artis is featured prominently, the band isn't. They don't even appear in the video, as they're shown only in black and white still photos. In an interview with Hit Parader in 1994, Cornell talked about the video, stating, "I think we were fairly smart with Spoonman in that you really don't see us that much in the video. You see various pictures of us, but it's not quite the same as having us in your living room all the time. We're trying to maintain some degree of mystique about Soundgarden. I guess I remember back when I was a kid long before MTV, and the only way to see my favorite bands was to go to their concerts." He went on to add that MTV has helped a lot of bands, but they've also robbed a lot of bands of that special mystique. The second single released from the album was The Day I Tried to Live, which was issued a few weeks after Kurt Cobain's death, and it peaked at number 13 and 25 on the mainstream rock tracks and alternative airplay chart. The third single and one of the band's most iconic songs, as well as iconic songs of the era, Black Hole Sun, was issued in May of '94. It ended up topping the mainstream rock tracks chart and went to number 2 on the alternative airplay chart and pop airplay chart. Superunknown gave Soundgarden their first number 1 album of their career, with it eventually being certified 6 times platinum stateside. They also had 2 other successful singles with My Wave and Fell on Black Days. Sadly, though, all the success came with a bunch of problems. The tour for Superunknown represented the first time the members of Soundgarden did their own headlining shows with an extensive stage production. Matt Cameron told Greg Prato, "For the most part, it was pretty fun. Then towards the end of the tour, Kurt died, and I think the whole fabric of the group was starting to unravel." Guitarist Kim Thile clarified that it was this point in the band's career there really wasn't any interpersonal tensions, but rather it was just stressful always being on the road and dealing with emotions without a support system, especially after Kurt died. Maybe foreshadowing the upcoming problems the band would face, the last date of the Superunknown tour didn't go well. Thile recalled to Greg Prato, "Our last show was at the Memorial Stadium in Seattle, a really bad show. Chris's voice was having a really time. When the show was over, he just walked off stage, got in a car, and took off." Soundgarden only put out one more album for the time being, 1996's Down on the Upside, before calling it quits the following year. Soundgarden did reunite almost a decade later, putting out one more album, doing some tour dates, but sadly in 2017, frontman Chris Cornell passed away.